For the sake of not wanting to make anybody scared, I just won't give any details, but I can say it's been very, very high, including one evening, 3 different people had basically the same dream. And it was clear from the Lord, and as we've been praying and interceding for our church, God is, it's a very simple verse, but God has given one verse, one series of verses that we just overlook because we've memorized it all, and that is to just pray and give your supplications to the Lord in Philippians 4:6, be anxious for nothing. Just let that sink a little bit. This is what the Lord has said to us. Be anxious for nothing.
Don't worry about anything, one translation puts it.
That's what he said to us. But in everything with prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses any understanding whatsoever, will defend, protect, treasure, and guard your heart. That has been what the Lord has said to us. And I know that we're all religious, and I know we can all turn into churchianity kind of people, but honestly, when God gives 3 different people basically the same dream the same night, and then throughout the last 2 weeks, I have had people specifically texting me, I am under a great pressure of anxiety. A debilitating, one person wrote, a debilitating pressure of anxiety. And yet God has already said, be anxious for nothing, be anxious for nothing. And so if you're feeling that, that is the word of the Lord to you. Don't worry about anything. Pray. Let your requests be made known. Thank God. Rejoice in who He is. You're okay. You are okay. Don't fall to the temptation. So, that's a word for you. Job chapter 20, round 2 of Job jabbing. Job has had enough of his friends. He closes by basically calling them a bunch of liars, absolutely tired of dealing with them. They're making up their stories to fit their theology. They are seeking, we talked about sin sniffing. They're looking and looking. They're repeatedly accusing Job of hiding some terrible sin. He's sick of it. He ends with these words. Chapter 19, verse 1929. Be afraid of the sword for yourself, for wrath brings the punishment of the sword, that you may know there is a judgment. He ends by saying, watch your mouth, boys, because you are so wrong, God's going to bring judgment on you. Or as Jesus said it better, with the exact same judgment that you are judging, you had better be careful that you're ready to be judged. It is okay to say this is wrong, and it's okay to say to your friend this is wrong. But if it's wrong for your friend, then folks, it's wrong for you. And if you say God will bring judgment against that, God will bring judgment against you for the exact same thing. This is the whole plank in the eye. Be careful that you're not judging someone else, that you're doing yourself. For with the measure that you are using, that's the measure that will be used to you. So basically, Job says, I'm giving you a warning. Be careful what you're saying about me. Now, James 5:11 in the Old King James, it says, you've heard of the patience of Job. And as I've been going through Job, the time of earthly loss, where his children and his finances, his family and his health are all taken from him, it's just 2 chapters. And then there's 30 plus chapters of his friends whining at him and picking at him and condemning him. And I wonder if the patience of Job really is in reference to dealing with his miserable comforters, that the suffering, he's gone through the suffering, but now his friends are not helping at all. Be careful that you're not that kind of a comforter. So Job says, be careful. You're going to be judged. Be afraid of the sword for yourself. And then in chapter 20, this guy can't take it. Zophar the Naamathite answered and said, How dare you talk about me? That's what he says. Therefore, my anxious thoughts make me answer. Because of the turmoil within me. This is how he feels about what? About what? I have heard the rebuke that reproaches me. And the spirit of my understanding causes me to answer. Do you get that? He has just spent, hundreds of verses telling Job what a wicked sinner he is. Job says, hey, buddy, if you're going to call me a sinner, just be careful you're not the one who gets the axe. And this guy's like, oh, how dare you speak to me like that? He's clearly ticked about Job's last comment. He's not going to receive rebuke from a guy who's covered in boils, who God has tore his family away from and stole all of his goods from. He's laying in an ash heap. Who are you to tell me anything? Look at yourself. Ho, 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 ho. Oh, I get it when God at the very end says, oh, Job better pray for you because I'm going to kill you, Zophar. Because, Zophar was really out of line. He wasn't, and the thing is, Zophar was never really sensitive about the words he chose. Eliphaz, his first friend, at the very beginning, he was kind and elegant. But Zophar, he just hit Job out of the blocks. And so he was never sensitive about the words he chose. But now that the words are about him, he's a little sensitive. Proverbs chapter 9, verse 8 says, you'll be able to identify a scoffer. Because a scoffer hates you when you correct him. But if you rebuke a wise man, he loves you. So when you bring a corrective statement to somebody and their first response is anger and anxiousness and turmoil and the need to talk back, you're dealing with a scoffer, not a wise man. Most people are scoffers. Most people are ready and willing to rebuke others, but they don't want any rebuke for themselves. One of my favorite verses, because it is a word that we don't like to use in my family, so it's a little like edgy, is Proverbs 12:1. The person who hates correction is stupid. That's the word. If you hate correction, I just want to tell you, you are stupid. I just can't believe I get away with saying that, but it's in the Bible. Do you not know this of old, since man was placed on earth, this is Zophar, that the triumphing of the wicked is short? It's just poof. Sure, they're powerful, but then poof, they're gone. And the joy of the hypocrite is but for a moment. Though his haughtiness mounts up to the heavens and his head reaches to the clouds, yet he will perish forever like his own refuse. Those who've seen him will say, where is he? Where is that really powerful, famous man? He will fly away like a dream and not be found. And yes, he will be chased away like a vision of the night. The eye that saw him will see him no more, nor will his place behold him anymore. Okay, now remember, this is Hebrew poetry, so the point is he's building this scene. Look, he's going to be gone, and he's going to be gone that fast. His children will seek the favor of the poor. In other words, his kids, they're not going to be doing very well. After he disappears, they're not going to be doing very well. And his hands will restore his wealth. They're going to have to work hard. His bones are full of his youthful vigor. He's a young man, but it will lie down with him in the dust. This is a very strong warning, and the warning is this: the wicked have really short lives. Soon everything's gone. Their children, they suffer. They themselves actually die young. Is that true? It's been said that, only the good die young. Which is it? Is it only the wicked die young or only the good die young? Is this guy right? He is a little bit right. Do you know that your life is very short, whether you are wicked or good? Do you realize how short your life is? Listen to what a very famous man who lived to be 120 wrote in Psalm 90. The days of our lives are 70 years. Who wrote that? Who lived to be 120? Moses. Moses wrote this. This is Psalm 90. The days of our lives are 70 years, and if by reason of strength they are 80 years, yet their boast is only labor and sorrow, because soon it is cut off, and we fly away. Oh, that's really encouraging. He goes on to say, so teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Here's a guy that was Prince of Egypt, shepherd of sheep, ruler of Israel, who lived 120 years, and he said, oh my goodness, make sure you get things right. It's really short. Your life is really short. It is estimated, now there's no way to actually have the exact numbers, but it is estimated that of all the people who've ever lived, 93% are already in the ground. Only 7% of all history of the people who've ever lived are even alive right now. 93% are gone. And in 100 years, you'll be part of that group, unless the Lord returns. Congratulations, though. If you live a really, really, really long time, even by the most conservative estimate of how many years humans have been on the planet, even by the most conservative estimate, you will live a whole 1% of known time. Wow. That is a long, you could just celebrate that 100th birthday and go, wow, I lived 1% of how long people have been around. Our lives are short. It's not just the wicked. Everybody's life is short. So Moses says, God, teach us to realize how short our lives are, Psalm 90:12, that we might be smarter, that we might be wiser. That's the whole reason behind what Jesus gives a parable in Luke 16. Listen to this parable. The whole point is you're only here this long. I know of those of you who are young, you think, oh, I've been alive forever. I'm now 8, right? Ask somebody who's 80. Lloyd, can you understand me okay? Conrad, can you understand me? How long has your life actually been? Long or short? Short. And yet the 8-year-old thinks it's been long, right? And you think back on memories and they're just that fast. So everybody ends up in the same place. So Jesus gives a parable. I'm going to read it to you out of Luke chapter 16. Don't get confused on some of the words he uses. I'll explain them. There was a certain rich man who had a steward. This is a guy who oversaw his house. And an accusation was brought to him that the man was wasting his goods. So this guy wasn't even a very good housekeeper or steward. The master called him and said to him, what is this I hear about you? Give an account of your stewardship. Give an account of what you've been doing. You're done. You're done. You're fired. It's over. Now, we're going to go and hear the story of this man's life, but Jesus points at this man's life and says, see, even wicked people are smarter than the godly people. Okay? You just found out that it's over. You have 1 week to get things in order. And then you're fired. What do you do? Well, if you are smart, you prepare. You got 1 week. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? So the steward said within himself, what am I going to do? What shall I do? My master is taking the stewardship away from me. It's going to be over. It's all over. I can't do this. I can't do that. I have resolved. That word there. I have thought. Have you thought? I have thought what to do. Have you thought about heaven? Have you spent any time thinking about heaven? Because if you did, and you really believed it was waiting you, it would affect what you do. And that when I'm put out of the stewardship, I might be received into the houses of my friends. So he called every one of them, you know the story, and he said, how much do you owe? And he said, cut it in half. And how much do you owe? And cut it by 20%. And he gave everybody this great debt because he had 1 more week of service, 1 more week of work that he could plan for the future. And the master commended the unjust steward because he was so shrewd. It's really interesting, that word for shrewd. You know what it means? He used his mind. That's literally what it says. Because, man, He got me. I'm all ripped off. But man, that guy's smart. He's got a bunch of friends now. Right? All these people that don't have to pay me. He, and this word here literally means used his mind. For the sons of this world, that means the lost businessmen and entrepreneurs and scoundrels who are ripping everybody off, they are thinking ahead. They plan their education. They plan their marriages based on financial prosperity. They plan their locations based on who they can scam. They plan ahead. Whereas, he said, the sons of this world are more shrewd in their generation than the sons of light. And yet many a Christian just doesn't think about the fact that when they're 80, their life will seem like a wisp of vapor. And then Jesus says, I say to you, make friends for yourselves by the unrighteous mammon, literally by the goods of this world, by whatever you have of this world. Make friends that when you fail, not your job, not your occupation, when you fail, they may receive you into an everlasting home. What's the point? Your life is short. Use your brain. That's what Jesus says in Luke chapter 16. Let's go back to Job chapter 20, verse, what was I at? 12? Though evil is sweet in his mouth, and he hides it under his tongue, though he spares it and does not forsake it, but still keeps it in his mouth. He's talking about these evil people. Remember, he's implying that this is Job. Yet his food in his stomach turns sour. It becomes cobra venom within him. He swallows down riches and vomits them up again. Hebrew poetry, it's beautiful. God casts them out of his belly. He will suck the poison of cobras. The viper's tongue will slay him. He will not see the streams, the rivers flowing with honey and cream. He will restore that for which he labored and will not swallow it down. From the proceeds of business he will get no enjoyment because, for he has oppressed and forsaken the poor. Who's oppressed? Who's he talking about? Who's he talking about? He's talking about the wicked people in response to Job's response that he's not wicked. He has violently seized a house which he did not build. Now, I don't know how long this buddy of Job's and he were friends, but it seems like a long time. I mean, he felt compelled. He was one of 3 people who felt compelled to go comfort Job, right? So they seem to have been friends for quite a while. Yet he's outright declaring that Job has oppressed the poor and he's foreclosed the houses of the downtrodden. Where's he getting this information? Did you say Facebook? Yeah. Yeah, Job and Facebook relate a lot in my mind. He's grasping at gossip that he created. It's his gossip. Remember, up until now, they've been saying, what's the sin, Job? What's the sin, Job? What's the sin, Job? We know there's a sin. What is it? Now they're just jumping past that. We know what the sin is, Job. You have stolen the houses of the poor. You've oppressed the poor, and you've been evil in doing these things. This is ridiculous. First of all, we know it's not true. God said he's blameless. But why is he doing this? Why is he now making up lies? Why? He wants to justify his religious beliefs. What religious beliefs? What are the religious beliefs? This is going to hit home hard. What are the religious beliefs that now he has to make up a lie about Job because Job is suffering? He's got religious beliefs that he now has to lie to validate. What are those beliefs? I see a lot of lips moving, but I can't hear anything. It's the prosperity gospel. It's what sells on TV, and people tune into it, and they believe it. If you follow Jesus, you're going to be rich, and if you don't follow Jesus, you're going to be poor. And it's a lie. and they make up lies to validate their religious beliefs. And people don't reject the lie. You see, they have a belief that sinners are miserable and saints are prosperous. It's out there today. It is the most popular form of Christian doctrine on the radio, on TV, in papers. It's a lie. Just as surely as this is a lie. Job has not sinned. Has Job sinned? Who stands before God and blames Job when God says he is blameless? Who will stand? Kenneth Hagin? Kenneth Hagin, who claims lies because he has a doctrine that says if you are full of faith, you'll never be sick. And so he is actually quoted as not having a headache for 45 years. Instead, he says simply symptoms, the pain in my head is simply a symptom, not an indication of a headache. That's a direct quote. Or how about this one from a guy named Fred Price? God has pleasure in prosperity, so he must have displeasure in poverty. Poverty could not be from God. So I want to ask you, who did Jesus go to? The rich? Who filled the church in the New Testament? The rich? The powerful? The wealthy? This is not a new idea. This lie, this religious lie, is not a new idea. In fact, it helps us to understand something that Jesus said. Jesus said in Matthew 19, he said these words, and it blew his disciples away. Here's the words, Matthew 19:23. Assuredly, this is the Son of God who just said that. Assuredly, I say to you that it is hard for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Now, their whole belief system taught them by the Sadducees and their own priests is that if you follow God, you will drive a nice car, have a nice house, live a long life, have a full bank account. They had been taught that. They had believed it. Jesus came along and said, oh my goodness, you don't want to be rich. It's hard to go to heaven. You know what the disciples said in response? Who knows what their answer was? Who then can be saved? It so tore apart their own religious beliefs. Jesus tore them apart. No, your wealth is not an indication of your worthiness. It's a lie. But he's just lying away. Verse 20, because he knows no quietness in his heart, he will not save anything he desires. Now, this verse can be translated differently, and I want to read it to you. This guy, Zophar, says, because he knows no quietness in his heart, none of his desires will save him. Now, he's right. That's a translation that you could do for verse 20. None of his desires will save him. That's really what we see in our culture to the lost, is if you are thin enough, you'll be saved from your sorrows. You'll find contentment in your spouse. You'll find contentment in your music. You'll find contentment in whatever it might be. We are continually drawn towards things that promise something they never deliver. How many of you have ever bought a brand new car and 1 week later you felt bad? You know what they call that? I bet you do, don't you, Mark?
I felt bad 1 minute after.
Buyer's remorse. Buyer's remorse. If you write in your Bible, you really should write buyer's remorse over Isaiah 55:1. Let me read to you what God says. Listen to these words. Oh, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters. And you who have no money, come, buy and eat. Yes, come buy wine and milk without money and without price. Why do you spend money for what is not bread? And why do you spend your wages for those things that don't satisfy? Listen carefully to me and eat what is good. Let your soul delight in abundance. Incline your ear, come to me, hear, and your soul shall live. God absolutely confronts this doctrine. Why are you focusing on your finances when in fact everything that I have for you is totally and completely free of charge? You want contentment? It's free of charge. Satisfaction? Free of charge. Paid for by the blood and death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Why? He puts his hands in it. Why do you have buyer's remorse? Don't buy. Receive. There's a big difference. Nothing is left for him to eat. He goes on to say, therefore his well-being will not last. In his self-sufficiency, he will be in distress. Every hand of misery will come against him. Again, he's pointing at Job saying, you're in trouble. When he's about to fill his stomach, God will cast on him the fury of his wrath and will rain it on him while he is eating. And you think you're going to have peace, Job? You're not going to have peace. He will flee from the iron weapon. A bronze bow will pierce him through. It's drawn and comes out of the body. Yes, the glittering point comes out of his gall. This is a terrible, ugly, disgusting picture. He's pulling an arrow out of his liver. Terrors come upon him. Total darkness is reserved for his treasures, and unfanned fire will consume him. An unfanned fire just smolders. It's a real slow death, Job. It shall go ill with him who is left in his tent. The heavens will reveal his iniquity, and the earth will rise up against him. The increase of his house will depart, and his goods will flow away in the day of his wrath. This is the portion that he ends it with a summary. Just in case you didn't get this, Job. This is the portion from God for a wicked man, the heritage appointed to him by God. Wait a second. How did this whole thing start? Why did Zophar have to respond? Do you remember? He told us. Why did Zophar have to respond? Read it. Remember, it was the very first verse. Why did Zophar have to respond? Because he was rebuked. How does he respond to rebuke? By just ripping on the rebuker. Who are you? You're just wicked. In fact, I know things that even you and God don't know about you. Job. I mean, can you imagine the patience of Job? I mean, he basically says this, but wouldn't you just say, please go visit my wife? I would. Remember who his wife is. Good. Can you guys go just have a potluck with my wife? Okay, I'll just sit here. Then Job answered and said, listen carefully to my speech and let this be your consolation. He calls them miserable comforters, remember? Now he's like, hey, I'd like to give you a little of your comfort. I'm going to give some of your comfort to you. Bear with me that I may speak, and after I've spoken, just keep mocking. You can see he's just a little sick of these guys. Just give me a couple minutes to talk, and then you can just go ahead and do some more to me. As for me, is my complaint against man? I mean, who are you? I don't really care what you think. I would appreciate if you just be quiet. He actually told him that earlier. Could you just be quiet? And if it was against man, why should I not be impatient? Okay, let's say I was going to speak to a man, and it was a man's fault for what's occurred. It isn't a man's fault. But if it was, wouldn't I have a right to complain? And how does he respond? He says, look at me. Now remember, when they first arrived in Job chapter 2, they raised their eyes from a great distance, and they didn't even recognize Job, their friend. He was so disgusting looking, they lifted their voices up and they wept. Job says, look, you don't think I have a right to be a little upset? Can you just take a look at the oozing bloody sores and the worms coming out of my skin and the fact that I'm vomiting all the time? He had a whole list of things. Don't you think I have a right to be a little upset? Look at me and be astonished. Put your hand over your mouth. Even when I remember, I am terrified. I just think of how bad my life is, and it freaks me out. And trembling takes hold of my flesh. And then he goes on to say, let's just look at reality. Can we just do a simple reality check? Why do the wicked live and become old? Do they or do they not become old? Probably at the exact same ratio as the godly. Yes. Why do they become mighty in power? You ever seen a wicked person become powerful? Their descendants are established with them in their sight, and their offspring before their eyes. Their houses are safe from fear because they can afford a good security system. Neither is the rod of God upon them. My wife, if she's out here, she'll love this. I got this. It was for a cattle person. I'm not a cattle person, but my wife is. Their bull breeds without failure. Now that's a good day. And their cow calves without miscarriages. Like, yeah. They send forth their little ones like a flock, and their children dance. Man, they've got it good. Their cows even all reproduce. They sing to the tambourine and harp and rejoice to the sound of the flute. Now, contrary to our popular opinions and the lies that are being taught by the prosperity gospel, David said in Psalm 37:35, I saw the wicked. He was in great power and spreading himself like a tree. So Job's just asking some questions. Hey, wait a second, Zophar. Are you trying to tell me that the wicked always are poor? They die young? They have sick children? Or maybe there's some success. You ever seen a wicked person successful? Use your brain, Zophar. They spend their days in wealth and in a moment go down to the grave. He's even whining about the fact that when they die fast. They don't linger like I am. Yet they say to God, depart from us. For we do not desire the knowledge of your ways. Who is the Almighty that we should serve him? And what profit do we have if we pray to him? Now that is an absolute truth. The prevailing attitude of most wealthy is this: what profit is there in prayer? It's the bottom line, man. It's about the economy. What profit is there in prayer? We need to plan. We need to strategize, not pray. Remember when Paul wrote to the church? He said to them, you see your calling, brethren. Not many of you are very wise according to the flesh, meaning you're not important in this world. Not many of you are mighty. Not many of you are noble. Why would he say that unless the church was full of common people? If you are rich today and you are actually going to heaven, you are a very special person because it's hard for rich to go to heaven. And if you find poverty in your life, let me just encourage you, God may be making sure that you are going to heaven. It's a fact. Indeed, their prosperity is not in their hand. The counsel of the wicked is far from me. How often, Zophar, is the lamp of the wicked put out? How often do they die young? Just tell me. How often does their destruction come upon them? The sorrows God distributes in his anger. Now, Job is getting angry. He says, I look out and the wicked are prosperous. You know there's a name for that. There's a reason that wicked person just keeps on living and keeps on living. Paul quotes it in Romans chapter 9, verse 22. He says, it is the long suffering of the Lord. Is God grieved at their actions? Well, what does suffering mean? God is grieved at their actions. The long suffering of the Lord. Paul refers to it as God enduring with much long suffering, Romans 9:22, even though they hate him. This actually blessed me a little bit. Peter uses the same word, long suffering, but he makes it a name. He gives God the name, the divine long suffering. In 1 Peter 3:20, Peter's describing how wicked the people were during the time of Noah. How wicked? So wicked, God had to absolutely devastate the entire planet. That's how bad they were. God said, we got to do something. They're going to destroy themselves, and they're going to just do the worst things possible. Nothing is restrained from them. And he sent Noah, who had to build a massive structure for all these animals to make it through this flood. Took years and years, some people saying more than 100. Don't know for sure, but a long time. And while he was there, it says, God, the divine long-suffering, waited in the days of Noah while the ark was being prepared. Every day that you could hear the hammering of those wooden dowels into that boat, caulking of seams, the building up. Every day, God was suffering and waiting, suffering and waiting. So just because the evil are not quickly judged, don't think God has ignored it. He is suffering through it. And 1 Peter goes on to say, waiting for them to repent. And as we heard from Terry, he waited long enough that there are billions who have repented, though the world is full of evil. Many have repented. They are like straw before the wind and like chaff that a storm carries away. They say God lays up one's iniquity for his children. Well, what in the world does that mean? Well, I'll paraphrase it. They say, I'll be fine. My kids will be the ones who suffer. That's what the wicked say. Let him recompense him, my kids, that he may know it. Let his eyes see destruction, and let him drink the wrath of the Almighty. I don't care about my life as long as my life is good. I don't care if my kid's life is bad. For what does he care about his household after him when the number of his months is cut in half? He doesn't care if his kids die young. Here, what's your point, Job? Job's saying, look, you're saying my kids have suffered because of my sin. That's what they've been saying, right? Because I'm wicked, so God judged my kids. He's saying, if I was really wicked, I really wouldn't care. The wicked are selfish. They're completely self-focused. They don't ask the question, how's this going to affect my kids? Do you know that according to a national committee, we are in what's called a father absence crisis in the United States? 1/3 of children are currently not living with their father. Up to 30% of the children in the United States do not live with their father. And in fact, they tracked a bunch of statistics, and they have what they call a father factor in all of these societal issues. If you are missing your father due to drugs, due to incarceration, jail, due to abandonment, here are your statistics. You are 4 times more likely to live in poverty than the rest of the U.S. You are 279% more likely to use drugs. You are 7 times more likely to be pregnant as a teenager. And this one blew me away. You are 2 times more likely to die before you're 2 years old. If you do not have a dad, you are 2 times more likely to die before you are 2 years old. The wicked don't care. Like, hey, I'm doing my drugs, I'm doing my crime, I'm doing my time, I'm doing what I want to do, me, and the kids are suffering. Your choices do affect your children. In Exodus 20, there's a promise that the iniquity of the fathers does visit the children to the 3rd and 4th generation. But the good news is, David said in Psalm 27:10, when my father and my mother forsake me, then the Lord will take care of me. And the Bible says, the son shall not bear the guilt of the father. So you may have some suffering from your dad, but you carry none of his condemnation. You are free. And if your father and mother have abandoned you, the Lord will take care of you. But Job's point is, the wicked don't care about their kids. Can anyone teach God knowledge since he judges those on high? One dies in his full strength, being wholly at ease and secure. His pails are full of milk, and the marrow of his bones is moist. Another man dies in the bitterness of his soul, never having eaten with pleasure. They lay down alike in the dust, and worms cover them. What's his point? You can be wealthy and healthy and die, or as Mark Twain said, be so healthy you die of nothing. Or you can be skinny and scrawny and wormy and die, and you're both dead. Look, I know your thoughts and the schemes with which you would wrong me. I know you, Zophar. You just want to attack me. For you say, where is the house of the prince, and where is the tent and the dwelling place of the wicked? He calls me wicked, Job says. He says, where's your house? If you're doing so well, show me where God blessed you. Have you not asked those who travel the road? Do you not know their signs? For the wicked are reserved for the day of doom. They shall be brought out on the day of wrath. This is a really, really, really important point. Job says, Zophar, it's not about how successful they are in life. It's how successful they are after life. They will be reserved. There's a day of judgment. It sounds like Asaph in Psalm 73 when Asaph said, I couldn't understand all these prosperous wicked until I went into the sanctuary of God, and then I understood their end. It's the end, folks. It's the end where you have peace with God. It's the end. The wicked may prosper, they may thrive, they may even die those fast, painless deaths. But don't forget that the most 93% are already dead. If your life only occupies 1% of known time, what have the dead been doing the rest of the 99? The Bible tells us. Jesus describes the place where the dead go who do not know the Lord, the wicked, as hell. And he describes it by using these terms. Their worm never dies, and the fire is never put out. So even if there wasn't eternity, those who are in the grave who were wicked, it was their afterlife where the judgment came. There's no promised judgment, folks. No promised judgment on the wicked while we live. No promised judgment on the wicked while we live. But there is a guaranteed promise after we live. Jesus pulls it. You know where he pulled that? The worm never dies and the fire's never quenched? He pulls it from one of the most horrendous verses in the Bible. Do you know where it's at? The worm never dies, the fire's never quenched. He pulls it from the Old Testament, the last words of Isaiah. The very last words that talk about the people of the Lord worshiping God forever and ever, and they're coming up and they're praising God and they're rejoicing. And he says, and afterwards, if they want, they can go outside in Isaiah chapter 66, I don't have the verse written down, but the last verse, it says they can go out, listen to what he says, they can go out, these people who are praising God because they live for Jesus, and they go out and they can look on the corpses of the men who have transgressed against God, because their worm will never die, their fire will never be quenched, they shall be this disgust to all flesh. There is an indication that you and I will actually be able to see hell. And nobody standing there will go, oh, I wish I would have done more wrong. Nobody. K.P. Yohanan said he could hear the cries of hell once he had a dream, and he could hear the cries of hell, and that's why he quit his job as a pastor. That's why he started Gospel for Asia, to support missionaries so that the lost would not be lost any longer. It's a great deterrence. If we could see hell, I guarantee more of us would follow the Lord. But the wicked are reserved for the day of doom. Who condemns his way to his face? And who repays him for what he has done? Huh? Are you going to fix it? You going to fix it in this life? You going to be the one who brings about justice in this life? Is that going to be your life, your job? If so, you got a hard row to hoe. Yet he shall be brought to the grave, and a vigil kept over the tomb. The clods of the valley shall be sweet to him. Everyone shall follow him, as countless have gone before him. Yeah, 93% of everybody alive is dead. And then these last two words, or last verse. How then, Mr. Zophar, how can you comfort me with your empty words, since falsehood remains in your answer? What's the falsehood? Here it is. Don't miss it. Let's quote it and put it on Facebook. The falsehood of Job's comforters was this: only good things happen to good people, and bad things only happen to bad people. You will never find this in the Bible. There's no comfort in it. Because as soon as something bad happens to you, what's the first thought that goes to your mind, Rob? If you believe this, as soon as something bad happens to you, what is the first thought? I'm a mess. God is angry at me. Was God angry at Job? God was not angry at Job. Job's right. It's about the end. It's not about the now, it's about the then. It's about, did you plan ahead? Did you use your mind and think, I'm only going to live 1% of time. Maybe I should plan. Jesus said this in John 16, in me you will have peace. In this world, no peace. That's what he says. Listen to what he said again. In me you will have peace. In the world you will have trouble, tribulation. But that's okay. Be of good cheer. I beat the world. John 16:33. Job is teaching us that it's God's promises and the afterlife that bring us comfort. And if you're trying to bring me comfort by saying, oh, if that's happening to you, you have cancer, that's because you have sin in your life. God is teaching you something, isn't he? He's disciplining you, isn't he? But that's the truth. That's the lie that's in the teaching of the prosperity gospel. And it is just Job's comforters, and they were wrong. Instead, Paul said these words, I am convinced, have confidence in, and know the fact of that death, life, angels, principalities, powers, the present things, the future things, height, depth, nothing that has ever been created can ever separate me from the love of God that is inside Christ Jesus. And that is the truth that they don't have, that Job does. I know that my Redeemer lives, and he shall stand at last on the earth. And after my skin is destroyed, this I know, that in my flesh I shall see God, whom I shall see for myself and not another. Oh, how my heart yearns within me. Amen? Blessed be the Lord. Blessed be his Son. Thank you that our hope is an eternal hope, and that suffering, Lord, I guess I would just say, even if I had to suffer my whole life, it's only going to be 1% of time. I will have 99% of time, Lord, in joy. But Lord, you go far beyond that. You give us eternity. There isn't even any time. So it's not 1%, Lord. It is something immeasurable. Time is short, Lord, and I just ask you to help me in my plans. Help each of us in our plans. Each of us is soon going to be cut off and fly away. Soon. 8 or 80, soon. Prosperous or miserable, soon. May we make friends in eternity by the way we live our life in the temporal world. Man, if we live like that, God, oh, how much comfort we would have. We would say, as Paul said, yeah, to live is Jesus, but boy, I'm looking forward to death. To die is gain. Bless your name, Lord. Amen.